Karen's father is a rich man, you know. When he passes away, she's gonna inherit a big fortune. I'm guessing she's gonna get 100 million, right?
Wow, that's incredible. I can't wait. Once Karen's father passes away, I'd love for her to take me on a vacation.
That sounds nice. I might ask her to buy me a car. James, what are you going to ask for? Man, I've always wanted to buy a high-end gaming computer. I wonder if I can ask her to get me one. As their lively conversation rose, it was clear that my husband and in-laws had no idea of the expression on my face on the other side of the door. I clenched my purse tightly. My name is Karen. I met my husband James at a social club for working professionals. We immediately hit it off because we shared the same hobbies. We spent our days happily and contentedly. One day, however, I received an unexpected phone call from my mother.
Karen, your father has collapsed.
What? My father, a jovial man who loved dad jokes, was in a good health. He was successfully running his own company. The thought of him collapsing was unimaginable. Worried about my father, I immediately left my home and headed to the hospital my mother had told me about on the next available train. My father was a truly kind man. Despite his busy schedule, he always found time to play with my brother and me. He was a great father who loved carrying us around on his shoulders. I remember how he sobbed uncontrollably when I read out a letter to my parents at my wedding to James. It was a vivid memory. To think of such a man collapsing. Not wanting to believe the news, I arrived at the hospital where my mother was seated next to my father. She turned around to face me when I arrived. Mom, how's Dad? Is he okay?
Karen, please calm down and listen.
While looking at my father lying on the bed with his eyes closed, my mother explained his condition. My father had suddenly collapsed at work and was immediately rushed to the hospital. Despite multiple tests, no abnormalities were found, and the cause of his illness remained unknown. More tests might reveal the cause, but they could also further burden his body. My mother had therefore decided to discontinue the tests.
It seems your father's going to have paralysis in the left half of his body.
So that means he's going to need to be cared?
Yes, indeed.
Despite my palpable anxiety, my mother maintained a composed expression as she spoke. My mom has already resolved herself to taking care of my dad. Thinking about it, I felt my mother's strength, but I was also overwhelmed by sadness at the thought that my father would no longer be the man I knew. While I was fighting back tears, my brother rushed into the room. "How's Dad's condition?" he asked, panting, to which my mother explained my father's condition just as she had to me. "Mom, you can't handle taking care of him on your own. I live close by. I'll come help."
Thank you, but please prioritize your own life. You already have your own family.
My brother, hearing this, nodded, saying, "I know." My brother had married long before I did, and now has a 4-year-old daughter. The one who has the free time is me, who hasn't yet had any children. But it would take me an hour on the train to get back to our childhood home. I may be far away, and it may take some time, but I'm not planning on leaving this all to you and Mom. If there are any changes with Dad, don't keep it from me. Let me know. Understood. But Karen, did you let John know before you came here? Ah. I suddenly remembered that I'd rushed out of the house without telling John. Seeing the look on my face, my brother said, "Make sure to contact him. John must be worried." So I quickly left the hospital room. I moved to a spot where I could call, then called John. As soon as he picked up, he asked, "Karen, where are you? I was worried." Hearing John's voice made me feel relieved, but I couldn't help but cry as I told him that my father had collapsed and would need care. John was shocked, saying, "Your energetic father?" But then he spoke to me gently to comfort me. I felt relieved that I'd married him, and when I told him I was coming home, he said gently, "I'll make dinner. Be careful on your way home." It seemed that my father would be staying in the hospital tonight. My mother and brother were also going home, so I decided to head home too. When I got home, John had made my favorite meal. "It must have been tough. Eat something you like to cheer up," he said, pulling out a chair for me. The kindness brought me to tears. John is usually cool-headed, but he's incredibly kind when I'm down, which always moves me. After thanking him for his comfort, I went to bed early that day. The next morning, when I had calmed down a bit, I told John that I wanted to help take care of my father from time to time, and he happily agreed. Furthermore, it seems that John had told his parents about my father's condition, and they offered to help with housework while I was away. I was surprised that I could get full support from John's family to help with my father's care, but when I called to thank his parents, John's mother laughed and said, "After all, your father's like family to us. You don't need to worry about a thing." John's parents, like him, are usually cool and collected. When they came to our house with smiles on their faces, asking how I do my chores, I was taken aback. Before my marriage, I had thought my in-laws were a bit cold, but that might have been a misunderstanding. I repeatedly expressed my gratitude to my husband James and my in-laws for their full cooperation in taking care of my father. My father was a talkative person, but he lost the ability to speak fluently due to the paralysis on his left side. However, there was a silver lining in the fact that my father was right-handed. He communicated his needs and thoughts to us by writing them on a whiteboard. Despite being almost bedridden, he cheered us up by drawing crude pictures on the whiteboard and writing his usual dad jokes. My brother also came to help with my father's care, but it was mainly my sister-in-law who was helping. With her experience as a caregiver, my sister-in-law kindly and carefully taught my mother and me how to assist him. My father, my mother, and I were worried that she might not want to take care of my father, who was not blood-related to her, but my sister-in-law didn't mind at all. Seeing my sister-in-law cheerfully say, "Your father has made me laugh so much, now it's my turn to make him smile," made me realize that my brother had indeed married a wonderful person. My brother might have been blessed with a wonderful spouse, but I am not losing to him in terms of having a wonderful spouse. After all, my entire in-law family is supporting my caregiving. Whenever I go to help with my father's care, my in-laws always ask about his condition. I was always grateful for their concern. However, I realized all of it might have been my misunderstanding by pure coincidence. That day, I left the house to take care of my father, but I noticed that I had forgotten my wallet when I reached the station. While feeling frustrated with my own clumsiness, I returned home. On the days I went to care for my father, my in-laws would always come to help with house chores, so I headed home thinking they'd probably find it amusing. I opened the front door, took out my wallet from my room, and returned to the front door. Then, I heard a conversation between James and my in-laws from the living room.
"So, is Karen's father not likely to pass away yet? I'm getting tired of waiting."
Huh? Wondering if my ears were playing tricks on me, I involuntarily stopped in my tracks. When I tiptoed closer to the living room door and put my ear against it, I could hear their conversation clearly. "Anyway, how much does Karen stand to gain when her father passes away? All this kindness we've been showing doesn't make sense unless we get a significant portion. Karen's father is a rich man, you know. When he passes away, she's gonna inherit a big fortune. I'm guessing she's gonna get over 100 million, right?"
Wow, that's incredible. I can't wait. Once Karen's father passes away, I'd love for her to take me on a vacation.
That sounds nice. I might ask her to buy me a car. James, what are you going to ask for? Man, I've always wanted to buy a high-end gaming computer. I wonder if I can ask her to get me one. Their conversation was filled with high spirits. On this side of the door, they probably have no idea what kind of expression I have on my face. I clenched my wallet tightly, putting all my strength into my grip. My mind was a mess, filled with anger, frustration, and sorrow. Being careful not to alert James and his family in the living room, I quietly left the house, my thoughts still in turmoil, and headed to my parents' house. If I thought my in-laws were being excessively kind to me, it was all because they were after money. My father's inheritance would certainly amount to a considerable sum. But just because of that, I couldn't accept the idea that my in-laws were hoping for my father to pass away. Unable to gather my thoughts, I sat for a while on a bench on the platform at the local station near my parents' home. The sound of James and his family's laughter still echoed in my mind. I can't forgive them. I will never forgive them. All foolish, just keep laughing. I swore I would get my revenge on James and his in-laws, who see nothing in my father who raised me lovingly but money. For that revenge, I acted as if I had heard nothing of their conversation. Even when they excessively asked about my father's health, I explained politely as always and said, "Thank you as always." I decided to exploit James and my money-grubbing in-laws as much as possible. I increased the days I spent caring for my father and unceremoniously dumped house chores on my in-laws. My inheritance-greedy in-laws would gladly accept any request from me. I knew that sometimes the faces of my in-laws and James tightened, but I didn't care. And about a year after my father needed care, his condition worsened. Believing the doctor's words that it wasn't something urgent, I was relieved. But I told James and my in-laws, my father might be in danger soon. It must have been the news they were waiting for. To the three of them, who could hardly hide their grinning, I said, "So?" and quietly handed over the divorce papers. "Thank you for all you've done. Please divorce me." At my statement, James exclaimed, "What?" My in-laws were frozen in surprise, but I calmly continued my prepared lines. "So, James, mother-in-law, and father-in-law, you were after my father's inheritance, weren't you? I overheard it all. Mother-in-law wanted a vacation, father-in-law wanted a new car, and James, you wanted a gaming computer, didn't you? I can no longer stay with the people who seem to be waiting for my father to pass away. The faces you made just now were truly ugly. It was as if I could see through to your vulgar thoughts of getting money when my father dies." As I spoke, my expressionless face seemed to terrify them. My in-laws remained frozen, and James, holding the already completed divorce papers, was opening and closing his mouth in shock. I no longer had any business in this house. "You can mail the divorce papers, but if you don't write them, I'll hire a lawyer. Please do it within a week," I told James before standing up. I picked up the luggage I had prepared earlier and left our home. On the train ride back to my parents' house, I was swayed gently in my seat. My parents were waiting for me when I arrived. Since I had told my mother about the situation, she embraced me and patted my back, saying, "You've done well." I hadn't cried in my mother's arms like this since I became an adult. The next day, James and my in-laws visited my parents' home. I decided to stay hidden and observe the situation. When my mother opened the front door, James and my in-laws were kneeling outside an apology. "We want to apologize to Karen. There seems to have been a misunderstanding. Please let us apologize to her properly."
"Misunderstanding? My daughter said she overheard your conversation. Apparently, you've been eyeing my husband's inheritance. I don't want to have any relations with people like that."
Despite being sharply dismissed by my mother, James persisted. He kept repeating his plea to see me.
"I can't let you see her because she doesn't want to. What she wants isn't your apologies, but for you to fill out the divorce papers. Have you done it? Hand them over quickly."
"Please give me another chance." As James cried out, the sound of a cane tapping could be heard from deep within the house. Turning to look, there stood my father, leaning on his cane with the assistance of my sister-in-law. "Father-in-law!" James's mouth dropped open upon seeing my father, whom he had only heard about. My father held up a whiteboard in his free hand for James to see. Written on it was a powerful message from him. "I won't hand my daughter over to someone who can't make her happy. Divorce her immediately, as she wishes." The message, written in a strong handwriting, seems to resonate more with James and my in-laws than anyone else's words. They finally seemed to realize that there was no point in arguing further. Slowly, James stood up, followed by my in-laws. "I filled out the divorce papers. Here they are." As he said this, James handed the divorce papers to my mother. He promised to notify me once he had filed them with the city hall, and my mother sent him and my in-laws away. I came out from my hiding spot and said, "Thank you, Mom and Dad." My mother gave a gentle smile, while my father laughed heartily and wrote a message on the whiteboard. "A father's duty is to protect his daughter until the end." Seeing that written on the whiteboard, I, Karen, couldn't help but cry. Since his left side had become paralyzed, my father had lost the ability to do many things on his own. I had thought that he was no longer the father I knew, but that was not the case at all. He remained the same kind and caring father. He was still the dependable father who always put me first. Dad, I hope you live a long time. With tears streaming down my face, I told him that, and he responded with a toothy grin. Since then, James has returned to his parents' house, apparently living quietly with them. As for me, I've gotten used to taking care of my father and balancing that with work. It's a busy life, but no matter how busy he was, my father always made time to play with my brother and me when we were young. Knowing this well, my brother and I, no matter how busy we get, never feel burdened by caring for our father. Half bedridden, my father has lost a lot of weight, and his appearance has completely changed, but his hearty laughter and his love for dad jokes remain the same. My sister-in-law also says that taking care of my playful father is a joy, and we're able to live a peaceful life.